Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Futurati Podcast, where we dive into how emerging technologies will impact the world and your bank account. I'm Trent Fowler, and joining me as always is my co-host, Thomas Fry. Thomas and I are futurists, keynote speakers, and consultants with decades of experience in analyzing trends and communicating new developments to audiences across the world. Reach out to us at futuratipodcast.com/contact-futurati if you'd like to hire us for consulting, to speak at your event, or to advertise on our podcast. Thomas, we just wrapped up an interview with Eliana Sherriff, better known as Ellie in Space, covering all topics related to space exploration, SpaceX, Elon Musk, and the general human impulse to expand into the stars. What did you take away from the interview?
I thought she was a real breath of fresh air. She is a former news anchor woman, knows how to interview people, but has really fallen in love with all the things that Elon Musk is doing, including things with the Boring Company and Neuralink and at SpaceX, at X, and Tesla. And so she is really up to date on almost all of the really creative stuff that he's working on right now. I know that he always has special projects going on in the background that he's not talking about or not telling people about. And that's always interesting, but I don't know. She seems to be really up on all the things that he's working on right now.
She was remarkably well-informed, and you get a lot of the infectious enthusiasm, I think, which she has really good vibes, I guess, in the common parlance, as the kids would say. She has great vibes, and she's very excited about the project. And I agree. I think that's a breath of fresh air is a good way to put it. She's super excited, super ebullient about it all, and just a real pleasure to talk to. And since, as you mentioned, she was in TV for a long time, she's just got that kind of like journalistic cadence down. She's very good at answering the questions, very good at moving the conversation along. And on the whole, it was a very pleasant interview.
Yeah, I loved it.
Well, we hope you love it. So without further ado, here's our interview with Eliana Sherriff. Tonight, we're joined by Eliana Sherriff, better known as Ellie in Space. After nearly a decade in TV news, Ellie quit her job to become a full-time space journalist, creating content on YouTube and X. She spends most of her time covering rocket launches, documenting the broader story of SpaceX, and the broader story of the human journey into space. If you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. And don't forget to check out our website, futuratipodcast.com. Ellie, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's hear a little bit about your background, your interests, and what brought you to working on the problems that you're working on today.
Yeah, I have a background of almost 10 years in TV news. So if you've ever seen the movie Anchorman with Ron Burgundy, I was the female version of that, Good evening, and thanks for joining us. Continuing coverage tonight, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was doing that for a long time, and it taught me, how to interview people, how to tell a story, learned how to work a camera and a tripod, and how to edit content. And so, toward the end of my news career, I wanted to find a way to make some extra money on the side. One of the surprising things to people is that just because you're on TV, it does not mean that you're getting paid a lot of money. And so there's not a lot of money in TV news. And I was like, maybe I'll just start a YouTube channel and see where it goes. And I started covering like travel vlogs, staying at unique Airbnbs. And they were fun, but they weren't really capturing an audience. And my ex-boyfriend actually brought home a Starlink one day and said, hey, we should make a video about this. And I'm like, what is Starlink? Zero education or, knowledge of what Starlink was. Really didn't know much about SpaceX, even though, I grew up in Manhattan Beach. They were right down the street in Hawthorne for many years of me living there, and sort of just made a video about Starlink that got about 10,000 views overnight. And I'm like, hold on, we're on something here. Okay. Gonna have to put the traveling on hold and maybe I'll treat this like it's my beat, because I know how to report on things. And a lot of times in the news, there'll be a crime beat, there'll be a health beat, kind of like a niche focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured I'm just going to cover Starlink. It's in the Better Than Nothing beta days. There's a lot of interest, but there's not a lot of access. And so that evolved into, I had a couple thousand subscribers, more views on the videos. And then in September of 21, so about 6 months or so after starting the channel, I went down to Starbase, Texas, not really knowing what to expect. And I was hooked. I was like, okay, this is not only fascinating to cover, way more inspiring than covering the local homicide or fire or car accident, you name it. But it's also something that there's a lot of interest in. And so since then my channel has evolved to covering a lot of the Starship program. That's a large reason why I moved here to Texas. And so that is kind of where my focus has been. And it's really taken me on a journey.
It's still travel. It's just travel up. It's travel to the stars now. It's a star travel blog.
Exactly. I still haven't been to space, but I did do a 0G flight, which is, you get to feel weightless. And so we're getting closer.
Nice.
So I've been speculating that Elon Musk is probably going to make a space-based power station. So having a Tesla power station that beams power down to Earth. That would seem like a natural extension of what he's doing right now. Have you considered that at all? And has Elon considered that at all?
I have not considered that, but if that were to happen, it sounds like we're quite far off from that.
Okay.
Quite far off from that. Your dreams will remain dreams, Thomas.
It could happen, but, look at where we are with today. I mean, just as of the recording of this podcast, we learned that the Robotaxi event will actually be held on October 10th. And so, these things take time to develop. And I think just like with what Tesla's goals are, we have some really, really ambitious things that SpaceX is trying to do. But we still haven't even, caught the booster. That's, what they aspire to do on this next launch. So it's going to be a while before, we get to these crazy futuristic goals.
I do know that several countries are working heavily on creating space-based power stations. I know Japan is, I know Russia is, the U.S., and so there's kind of this competition to see who can do it first.
Yeah.
And I'm also wondering, does that interfere with Elon's satellites that he has up currently? Because when you're beaming power back down to Earth, if you put another satellite in the way, that probably is not a good thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not super familiar with that aspect of it, but it sounds like a good video idea and something to investigate.
Right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of investigation, we're podcasters. We talk to a lot of people. We do a lot of research into different beats. I guess we're sort of a generalist beat, if you want to characterize it in those terms. I'm just curious as to what your research process looks like and how you go about staying on top of something as complex and fascinating as space exploration.
Yeah, I mean, things are just, it's too much for one person to keep up with, if I'm being frank with you. There is so much going on in the commercial space industry right now. And so obviously, scrolling and refreshing on X multiple times a day, I'm constantly learning new information. There's things changing. But also being able to drive down to Starbase and gather interviews in person. That's kind of where I shine and where I thrive because I know how to do that best, right? I spent many, many years interviewing people in person, and I think that that's the most authentic way to get a story. So I'd say that it's hard to decide what to cover, not because there's nothing to cover. There's too many things to cover. So you kind of have to triage, what do I think is most important? And because I kind of have still a news spin on things, I want to, cover what I think is the most relevant so I don't get behind, what the news is. So I may not be able to do it the same day, but usually if it's something really noteworthy, I'll try to have a video out the next day. Whereas I think some people wait until, even a week later. And at that point in my mind, with my training, that's old news. So, there's just so much going on. It's too much for one person.
So with SpaceX moving everything from California to Texas, what all's involved in that? And have you really gotten into that yet?
Yeah, I mean, moving everything, there's still going to be operations in Hawthorne. I don't think that everyone is going to have to drop everything and move to Texas. It sounds like this is more of a paperwork thing, and maybe some people in the admin building might have to relocate. They haven't given us much details, but if we look at, the footprint for Giga Texas and the transition from Fremont to here in Austin, there's still things happening in California. So I don't think it's going to be this, major disruption as some people have, I think, misunderstood it as.
It seemed to me, we've had this discussion in the past, that it'd be real interesting if somebody formed a corporation that was on a satellite, and so it'd be outside of the jurisdiction of land-based countries, and it would seem like that would solve a lot of problems.
You probably are outside the box on that, I wouldn't say.
Yeah. You probably haven't heard any rumors of that, I take it.
You were the first person to ever even put that idea forward, but I think it's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, so we don't bet against Elon. He's going to have his LLC in space. He's going to have this factory up there beaming power down. Well, we'll probably see that in a year or two.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we know he doesn't like Delaware. We know he doesn't like California. So he does like space, though. So that would seem like a natural extension.
That's not a bad idea. And I think, Texas just in general, it's a very business-friendly state. And so, it just, to me, as a business move, it makes sense to have sort of all of his companies here. And we see that he's doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of staying on top of, news stories and all of that, I mean, you do a lot of research into space exploration. What are some of the advancements that you see on the near-term horizon that have you especially excited?
Yeah. I think it's interesting right now. Falcon 9 is still currently grounded right now. So there's been a lot of, attention on that. That's something that we didn't expect to see, after their last failure was in 2016. But I think it's important to realize that they've had 300 or so successful launches since then. And so that's an advancement, right? To have a rocket that is so reliable, that is basically carrying the industry, and that does have a component of reusability with the booster. So that's already, something that I feel like people kind of overlook or take for granted because we're just so used to seeing Falcon 9 launching all the time. It's a little bit weird right now to have its absence. And so while some people may think, oh, is there something wrong with it? I think it's more just, reminding us how reliable it has been, and I believe will continue to be. Flight 5 that's coming up probably sometime next month, maybe might even slip until September. The idea that they would try to catch the booster of Starship with the Mechazilla, with those chopstick arms, we've never seen that happen before. So talk about, unprecedented, cutting edge, exciting, advancements. They're continuing to do things that have never been done before. And way back when they got their start, they were going completely against the grain, doing something that a private company had never done before. And now it's like we kind of forget that because you have all these other companies coming into the mix, startups that I think have the courage to try because of what the groundwork that SpaceX has laid. And so, as far as advancements, it'll be very exciting. Hopefully they're able to successfully catch the booster, but that's just one little milestone on many, many milestones on the trajectory to Mars, right? And so it's going to not be an overnight success, but it'll keep me having a job for quite some time.
Well, let's hope so. Tell me a little bit more about the catching the booster, because I am not super familiar with it. I haven't been keeping up in as much detail as I probably should. So what's going on there, and why is it such a big deal?
right now, if you've ever watched a Falcon 9 launch or you've seen it on, a stream, you can see that they either land it on land or on a drone ship. And so this idea that the booster won't need landing legs and they will be able to catch it with the tower is, again, something that is going to be sort of following the mantra of the best part is no part. It's going to encourage rapid reusability so that they can, their goals are tremendous. We've seen windows of, 6 months in between Starship launches that has narrowed down to about 3 months. But they want to be launching several times a day. They want to produce one Starship a day. They're expanding operations and their infrastructure down there in order to, meet these lofty goals. So it's just, we're trying to build the world's first fully reusable rocket. And they're doing it in a different way than we've seen with Falcon 9. Also, Falcon 9 is not fully reusable.
Hello, this is Trent Fowler, co-host of the Futurati podcast. One of the most common pieces of marketing advice I've come across is to know your audience and give them what they want. One difficulty in podcasting is that it's actually pretty hard to do this. None of the major platforms give us any way to reach out to you, our listeners, to find out what you enjoy about the Futurati podcast and what you'd like to see done differently. So we've decided to record this commercial and ask you directly to reach out to us. Head over to futuratipodcast.com, go to the contact page, and drop us a line. Tell us about your favorite and least favorite episodes, what you'd like to see us cover in the future, and anything else you want us to know. We produce this show for you, and we want your advice so we can make it even better. Thank you.
But I think...
Why is that? Why is that? Because I thought it was. That was the picture I had in my head.
No, so the booster, and that I am still learning how to articulate this as well as some of my peers in the space community. A lot of people that cover this stuff do have the engineering background. So, right now they have been able to make the booster reusable, which, kudos to them that, no one has ever done that. But getting the upper stage to be reusable is a completely different animal. And so not having it be expendable is, I think, a much harder problem. Why that is, I might have to prepare to that better. Yeah.
Boner friend.
Yeah, I've done it, Brett.
Right.
Well, it just seems to me that it's naturally much easier to catch something in a baseball glove than to catch something with chopsticks.
Right. Right.
Why have they chosen chopsticks? That doesn't make sense.
And, they've shortened them recently. So it's a very interesting. I remember going down there my first trip and they were still welding the chopsticks. And, I really didn't know anything I was looking at that time. And I was asking what are they welding? And they're like, oh, those are the chopsticks. Chopsticks? What are the chopsticks? Oh, for Mechazilla. Mechazilla? What the hell is Mechazilla? It's like, okay, what am I looking at? So it's this idea that you're going to have that precise landing, which they've achieved with Falcon 9, but man, no room for error, because if you blow it, you essentially, damage stage 0. And we already had damage after the first launch, major damage, that the tower wasn't taken out, but all of that ground infrastructure, they kind of jumped the gun. They probably should have waited until the water-cooled steel plate was ready to be used. They were working on it, but I think that they wanted to launch. And so that, there was a lot of cleanup, a lot of rebuilding that needed to happen, and a lot of reinforcing. And so they've kind of solved that issue of the pad. But man, when I asked Elon on the day of the last launch, I was like, are you guys going to attempt it? And he's like, I don't see why we shouldn't. And I'm thinking, are you sure?
It might not work, Elon. It might not work.
You might, but the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean the stakes because of the damage, or just the stakes in getting humans to Mars?
Because of the damage, because of the possible damage. I mean, I can't imagine what kind of aftermath that would create, not only for SpaceX, but for spectators. That sounds like it could be absolutely catastrophic. And so, it's I think we, I don't know, maybe you think about this, but there have been times in the past where rocket launches have gone very wrong. And whether it's, a rocket scooting out to the side or, a rocket going the wrong direction, landing, China has this, unfortunately, a lot, where it's landing in a populated area. Crazy videos of it just falling out of the sky and people starting to run. Well, that's not what should be happening. That is not the reaction that we want. And so it's just, even during the first launch, I was quite nervous just because I was on crutches at the time. I had just broken my femur. And so I'm thinking, if this blows up, I can't run. And, it may seem like a silly thought, but, when you're trying to get as close as you can to the action, you better be sure you're not in the exclusion zone. And I think some people break that rule. If you watch it on the side of Mexico, you're for sure within, like 3 miles. It's like incredibly close. And yes, it's a great view, but I don't know what happens if something goes wrong. So, that's what I mean by a lot at stake. We want to keep people safe. We want to keep the pad safe, the tower safe, etc. But
we've all heard about his goal of getting to Mars, but lately he's talked some about going to the moon. Do you know what the top priority is at the moment? And is there a guesstimate date as to when either of them will be achievable?
Yeah. It's interesting when I interviewed him, and I didn't put this part in my interview, but I was going to ask him, you guys have the technology. Do you ever see a scenario where you just go to the moon without NASA? And as soon as I said the word Artemis, he said, I'm not going to answer this. And so essentially, SpaceX was awarded a contract for the human landing system a few years ago. And so they're an integral part into our return to the moon, but they're not doing it alone. They're using Artemis. They're working with NASA. They're just doing the human landing system part. And that has been riddled with delays, riddled with issues. Just last week or so, I covered the fact that Congress is asking NASA to reaffirm the SLS rocket to find customers for the rocket. So, very, very strange things are going on. I don't know if we will see a future where SpaceX does it alone, the return to the moon. But, what we're looking for this time around is not just a return to the moon to do a flags and footprints mission. We want to establish a permanent moon base. And there's a lot of, really complex issues that come with that. And so in the last Starship presentation that Elon gave, he talked about establishing a moon base alpha. So they've given some details, but not to the extent as I'm sure many of my viewers would love to know. But, I think that I think SpaceX could definitely do it on their own, but that is not the current plan right now, let's say.
But it seemed like they could send up a bunch of his robots, the humanoid robots, and they could actually do a lot of building up there.
Totally.
And it could just be a total palace by the time he gets there.
I think that is 100% the plan. And Optimus is rapidly improving. They're every so often they're releasing a new video of
Right.
the Optimus robots, and wow. I don't know if I should be scared or excited. Wow.
Yeah. Well, especially with all the artificial intelligence and generative AI concerns that have emerged since the release of ChatGPT. Yeah, it's we are hurtling towards the future that 30 or 40 years ago was being written about in science fiction books, and I don't know if we're prepared.
We're not the Jetsons yet, though, so I don't know where the flying cars went, but
That's true. Well, I mean, lunar base, like you said, lunar base alpha, and I just got chills. I was like, that's such a cool phrase. I love that we're actually talking about this. What's the economic rationale for building a lunar base as against going to Mars?
Yeah, I mean, they call it the cislunar economy. And so the idea is, not only are you going to learn a lot of lessons, just like we learn a lot of lessons going to space, in the first place. A lot of the stuff that has been invented in space for space benefits us here on Earth. But, the moon is a lot closer and a lot more accessible than Mars. And so if we can establish a presence there, establish a moon base. We've never done that before. Sure, we've landed on the moon, and depending on who you talk to, we may be
allegedly landed on
allegedly, yeah, man. I'm telling you some of the comments in my videos. But we've already landed on the moon. We've already walked on the moon, but man, that's nothing compared to having an actual habitat and, somewhere where people can stay for an extended period of time. And so we're seeing an interesting shift right now with, the ISS is going to be coming to the end of its life soon, around 2030. And so that'll be replaced by private commercial space stations. And it's a really, really exciting time for space. But I think the biggest incentive to create a moon base is not so much for the economic reasons. It's for the lessons that you're going to learn by just figuring out how to do that. I interviewed a company down in San Antonio, not too far from me, and they're trying to build bricks made out of regolith. So moon dust, that's completely unruly, by the way, but they're trying to use what's already on the moon, which they call it in situ resource utilization. So instead of trucking a bunch of stuff, because we know that it's, weight matters when you're taking things to space. Why don't we use what's already on the moon, this dust? Why don't we use this regolith and melt it into bricks to create a landing pad? So that's what they're working on. And it was interesting, I made this video, and some videos are hits and some videos are misses. And, this video got over 100,000 views, and I wasn't expecting that. And I think people are really interested in the cottage industries around, SpaceX is obviously the big name, but SpaceX can't do it all. Not only other logistics other than just the rocket and getting there, landing, staying there, habitats, food, but also the mental health aspect, I think, is another interesting component of there is so much involved in, it's not only if we can get there, it's like, how can we do this? What's never been done before? What's not natural to us?
Yeah. So who has the right to sell land on the moon?
That's a good question. I think that at this point, I've seen commenters say they're worried that if China gets there first, China's going to make the rules. I think we have yet to see how it's going to go, but hopefully that's not the case. But
okay,
we got to beat the Reds. We got to beat the Reds. We did it once. We'll do it again. Speaking of the cislunar economy, we have spoken to a number of people who specialize in space industries and thinking about these sorts of things. What do you believe will be the first constellation of industries that are built in the space economy?
First constellation of industries. I think that just the logistics of building the base. I don't know if the experts, because I'm certainly not an expert in this, but I would guess that just the logistics of staying there and maybe the robotics that they'll use, because I know that there will be some, it might not be Optimus Bot up there, but, obviously robotics play a strong part in, creating robust construction.
There'll have to be some form of power up there. So power generation will be a big issue.
Right. That's a good point. And again, you guys are giving me ideas for, maybe you guys even know some people that you can let me know to reach out to that you found interesting.
Yeah, if you have well drillers up there that can drill for water, that'll be in big demand. I don't know if they can hit any water, but
well, that was one. Remember, we talked to his name is escaping me, but it's they're working on that asteroid mining setup, and the big thing wasn't gold or any sort of resource. It was water. It was that was one of the things that really surprised me. Like what they want to go get is like inconceivable amounts of water, and then they'll bring it here, not necessarily put it on Earth, but keep it in space and harvest it and utilize it for various other things. Maybe hydrating the people that are in the future private iterations of the ISS.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of putting industry in space. You know, there's so many amazing plans. We just have to have them come to fruition. So 3D
to actually do them.
Yeah, 3D printing organs in space. I mean, just like crazy things, right?
Yeah, we figured tourism would probably be the first big leg. There will just be lots of people who are fascinated by the idea of going into space. We figured prostitution will probably be popular as well in space. And then we figured like manufacturing was another one. Energy production is another one. And then all the research that you can do after that. And all of that, of course, is just stepping stones to getting to Mars ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. I forgot about the space tourism. That is definitely, you know, something that will be exciting to see how that actually plays out. I mean, I've seen many companies over the last few years talk about they're going to debut this space balloon, but where is it? So I don't know if these things just failed or if they're just still in the works. But as I've covered a lot of companies, some of them keep developing and some of them kind of stop giving updates. And then it's like, you know, one of my most popular videos about Boxable has a lot of question marks around it. And again, that's another sort of futuristic foldable homes, solve the housing crisis, but, you know, they've only delivered 500 homes and they have 3 factories now with 2 of them completely not producing anything. And so it's like questions of what's going on. So, you know, these things are hard.
Yeah, we've been hearing about space hotels for, I don't know, last 40, 50 years.
Right.
And we have yet to see anybody on the edge of even launching one.
Right.
I think that would be a real interesting industry. I've kind of come to the conclusion, though, that I think the space hotel is going to have to be manned completely by robots. You're not going to have staff people that go hang out on a space hotel for months on end. And so it's kind of vacationing with the robots.
Yeah.
And what would that be like? And what kind of entertainment would you have to have there to keep people entertained? There's lots of questions about that. Would people be willing to spend $2 million to go up there just to hang out with robots? I don't know. Probably would.
Have you seen the movie Passengers?
Passengers.
With Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt?
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I didn't recognize the name, but I know the one you're talking about, yeah.
Have you seen it?
I think so.
So, you know, the robot is like the bartender, and it's basically just them two are like the only, you know, humans.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like they have this like robot bartender. That's what you made me think of. But yeah, I mean, it's, I don't think I'd spend that much money. I mean, I'll tell you this, I wouldn't even spend the 10 grand that the 0G flights cost, even though I want a flight, and I'm very thankful that I want a flight. But man, $10,000 to barf your brains out. No thanks.
Did you do that? I've always heard like there's that stereotype.
I did. So I did. And you know, I'm lucky because I won it through a competition, and I'm kind of torn on it because I feel bad saying anything negative about it because I won it, right? But it's like I'm not gonna like be dishonest about my experience. My experience was the lunar gravity was manageable, and lunar gravity is, you know, as if we were on the moon, right? So it's not complete zero gravity. But then when we got to the zero gravity, just something flipped, and, you know, if you feel sick, too bad. You have, you know, 15 other people who paid a lot of money to be on this flight. So some of these space tourism things, you look at Blue Origin's sort of suborbital hops. I mean, those are just crazy expensive, and I don't really think it's worth it.
Are you enjoying this episode of the Futurati podcast? If so, please like it, Give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with your friends. By far, the best way to help us grow is to spread the word on social media, which will expose our content to more people and help us continue to bring you interviews with world-leading experts in AI, quantum computing, cryptocurrencies, and so much more. Thank you in advance.
Right. Not a lot of fun. Well, what about Mars? If you won a trip to Mars in a competition, would you go?
Depends on if I mean, it just depends on where they're at. You know, if it's a one-way ticket, no. If it's fairly early, I still think there's just better people suited to do that. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Jared Isaacman, who's a billionaire, pretty down-to-earth guy for being a billionaire. And, you know, he's already flown with SpaceX once. He's gearing up to do the Polaris Dawn mission, which will have the first private commercial spacewalk. And he just has the mindset. You know, he's built for this. He's made for this, and he would be, you know, you need like a certain type of person to carry out these missions. Even the people that recently egressed from the Chapea mission, which was a 1-year simulated Mars analog, they're sharing a 3D printed 1,700 square foot habitat here on Earth for a year.
That's a long time.
Thanks. No,
doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Well, speaking of mindset, I'm glad you phrased it that way. It's a perfect transition. These moments, you know. So having interviewed all these people who work in space and are pushing the frontiers of human reach forward, what kind of person do you think is what kind of person does it take to do that? What does it take to build a successful rocket company or a successful space enterprise? Like, are there themes you've noticed in talking to these people?
To build the company or to go to space?
Let's do both, but start with building it.
To build the company. So I think you're talking about someone by the name of Elon Musk. I mean,
did have him in mind.
I will say it's not just Elon. The team that works at SpaceX, particularly the people down in Boca Chica, Texas, you know, Hawthorne, I'm sure those people work hard, but Hawthorne is, you know, Southern California, perfect weather, you know, a great place to live. Boca Chica is a different story. Boca Chica is hot and humid most of the year. There's so many bugs. They're working crazy hours. And so a lot of people give Elon all the credit. And while he deserves much of the credit, talk about the team. You know, there's over 3,100 people working on site down there at Starbase. And they are the ones that are, you know, they have to be willing to make sacrifices to their personal lives, to spending time with their kids, to getting personal time, to getting me time, work-life balance. You're going to have to put a lot of that stuff to the side. And it's interesting, you know, if you've read the book Liftoff by Eric Berger, or, you know, talk to any of the employees that used to work for SpaceX, a lot of them, they get bored, right? They think SpaceX is too much. They're burned out. And then they work for somewhere else and they're like, this is boring, you know, like this is slow. And so it takes a certain kind of person for sure. I think most people would be completely overwhelmed by the workload, by the expectations. But the people that I meet down there at Starbase, and unfortunately, almost all of them, except for Elon, really can't talk to me on camera. But I know a lot of the people that work there, and they genuinely seem like I'm doing this because I care about the mission. I'm bought into the mission. I believe I'm doing something for the greater good. And I think that I'm doing something that humanity is going to benefit from. And, you know, talk about a goal. I don't think many of us can say that what we do on a day-to-day basis has such a profound, you know, weighted impact. It's like, I hope I get some views on a video. I'm really helping humanity. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that, you know, you have to be driven, you have to be adaptable, you have to be able to constantly iterate, you know, rapidly iterate like SpaceX does. And so when something goes wrong or they have to do some work to the pad, for example, they don't take time off. There is constantly activity going on down at Starbase. And so, Elon, he recently did an interview with Jordan Peterson. He said he had stayed up until 5 a.m., plugging in computers. This guy, he just doesn't sleep. So is that how I operate and how I'm programmed? Heck no, but some people are.
So one of the big questions that nobody has seemed to be able to answer yet is if you have a child in space, you deliver a baby in space, what actually does that affect how the child turns out, and is that child going to live?
Right.
And if you bring it back down onto Earth, will it survive? Have you seen any research on that or heard any?
I have. I think it's interesting that you bring that up because it's definitely a topic that it needs to be researched, much like sex in space needs to be researched. It sounds funny, haha, you're talking about sex in space, but seriously, it's like this taboo thing. There's a book called Packing for Mars by Mary Roach, and it is completely taboo to even talk about. Everyone denies that anyone has ever had sex in space, which who knows, but these things need to be studied. And so not only just carrying a baby, the gestation period, how did the different gravities, affect these things? And yes, so it's a great question that I don't know what the plan is. I don't know. But
if you put people up there for 2 or 3 years, it is going to happen, right?
Right.
They're not going to stay up there forever.
Right.
Especially if they go to Mars or that voyage, that distance, there's only so much to do in space, on a rocket ship. Right.
Exactly. But I think I think people laugh about it, but it is actually like, okay, then, what is the plan? You're just going to wing it? Because if we want to extend civilization, make life multiplanetary, all these things, like that has to be solved. Wow.
Right.
So you also cover some of the other companies that are in the Elon Musk orbit, Tesla and Neuralink and Starlink as well. What can you tell us about what they're all doing? And well, I guess maybe a better place to start would be how much time do you spend doing that, since your main focus is on space?
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I'll venture off and cover something different. But unfortunately, I have to, prioritize what will get attention because this is my full-time job. Maybe that sounds wrong to say, but it's like, well, if it is my full-time job, I have to be able to make an income from it. And Starship videos kind of are what people care about the most. However, I will say, unfortunately, the interview with Nolan Arbaugh, who is the first recipient of Neuralink, mind-blowing, no pun intended. I interviewed him a few days after Good Morning America, and it was a fascinating interview. Video kind of bombed, really didn't get much attention, and, maybe that's because it's not my main niche. Who knows why, but I thought that it was an important interview for me to do. And so sometimes, I'm working on a video right now. Actually, I took my dad driving in my Model 3. He's never even seen FSD.
I saw
and
that.
so, yeah. And so it's like, I'll sometimes do the oddball video about Tesla and just see how it goes. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. But I think that all of the, for example, one of the top videos on my page almost has 400,000 views is about a Tesla solar roof. I didn't think that was going to do so well, and it did. And then I tried to make another video, which was way more in depth. I had drone, all this stuff, totally bombed. So it's like, things are just random.
So you don't have any advice for content creators like us to figure out what one of our best videos was right after the invasion of Ukraine. And I was like, we got to get somebody on. That one blew up. It was great. So some of it's just timing, writing the news, but otherwise I haven't discerned much of a pattern.
I think it's timing and, man, the title and the thumbnail, you can try your best, but it doesn't always make sense. Some of the videos that I put a lot of effort into completely bomb. And then other videos where I'm like, this is kind of terrible, but I'm just going to throw it up there. And I didn't put a lot of effort into it, do well. So I think the main thing is just to keep going. You never know. I'll tell you this, right before I interviewed Elon Musk, my channel was doing bad because I had just been to Japan for 3 weeks, kind of wasn't posting consistently. I think that YouTube was punishing me for this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've stepped up my game for the last month since I've been home and my videos aren't getting like any attention. What's going on? Is my channel dying? And then, it happened to land that Elon interview and all of a sudden we're back on track. So it's, you just got to keep going.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, who else is considered a competitor to SpaceX? I mean, are the British competitors or the Japanese competitors?
I think I just interviewed Ashley Vance and Ross Kaufman. These are they just made a film for HBO, Wild Wild Space, and they're covering the commercial space industry. And oddly enough, they didn't showcase SpaceX or even Blue Origin. They mentioned SpaceX, but the two companies that they mostly followed were Astra and Rocket Lab. Well, Astra is not doing so well, so we won't talk about them. Rocket Lab, I think, will potentially be a pretty good competitor for SpaceX. I think that they have been sort of, quiet behind the scenes. I'm not sure if they get as much exposure or attention, but they're already working on a fully or a reusable rocket, much like a Falcon 9. And they do quality work. And so they're based out of New Zealand. But at the end of the film, Ashley Vance, who wrote a book about Elon Musk, a best-selling New York Times best-selling book, said, I think that, SpaceX and Rocket Lab are the two competitors. So
why not Blue Origin? Why are they not in the mix?
Why not? Well, look at what they've done over the last few years, right?
What did you get done this week?
They've had a complete pause on their celebrity sort of space tourism. So that has had, they had an anomaly that they had to address. No one was on board. So, no one got hurt. And actually the abort system worked flawlessly, but they had to that set them back for a long time. And so they're gearing up again for another one of those sort of suborbital hops. But man, even those get criticism. It's like people are like, you didn't even really cross the Kármán line. You're not really an astronaut. And so
what a fight to get into. What a fight to get.
Right. They're working on New Glenn, and we still haven't seen that be launched. New Shepard, like I said, it's going to be back launching another batch of people to do a little hop. And, I probably sound pretty negative here, but people aren't talking about them because they're not very media friendly. They're not spectator friendly. They have all these blue cones, like you can't even park on the side of the road to even just glimpse at their facility in Florida. And, they're really not doing much. And if they are doing much, they don't show people it. So, I guess maybe I don't sound very pleasant about it. But at least SpaceX, they're posting stuff all the time on X, and you can see SpaceX from the side of the road, unlike any company in the world.
Yeah, there's a spectacle around Elon. He draws a lot of attention. I mean, he's very polarizing in that way. I mean, you interviewed him. Was there anything that stood out to you about the differences between the man and the myth of Elon Musk?
Yeah, I'll tell you this, because I had met him very briefly at AI Day 2 in 2022. And I could barely get the words out. I handed him a 3D printed Tesla bot, and I'm like, here, it's for you. Like, okay, thanks. And, so I kind of sounded like a bumbling idiot. So I'm like, okay, I know I'm nervous. I know that this is like the biggest interview of my life. I don't want to be tongue-tied. I hope that I don't mess this up. But he was very intimidating to talk to. And when I watched the footage back, it looked a lot better than how it had went in my mind. As soon as I got done with the interview, I was like, he hates me. He will never let me interview him again. Like, that was so bad, because I can't get a read on him. And I don't know if that's because, he's like has the Asperger's or what it is. But I just, it was at the end of the day. Both of us were probably really tired. He was actually getting ready to go to the SpaceX party. They had a massively successful launch 4. And so to even get 15 minutes with him was pretty cool. But I don't think that I got a relaxed sort of like, let's shoot the shit type of Elon. I got sort of a rushed, tired, we have a hard out at 15 minutes and, that's it.
He smokes weed. Maybe give that a try.
I don't know if he actually does, like other than that one time on Joe Rogan that he completely pissed off every SpaceX employee because then they had to get tested for a year after that. Oh my God, that had such a negative repercussion. But I don't know. I think I think it went a lot better when I watched the footage, but it's intimidating, especially to like. It's weird because I've seen him at a lot of events. But to actually like make eye contact with him, I was like, oh my God, this is so weird. It's like actually him,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Meeting like a famous person.
So do your videos do better on X or on YouTube?
I would say they're still doing better on YouTube and for sure still making more money on YouTube. X, it's kind of like, on the one hand, Twitter never paid people out. So it's great that X is paying some people, not everyone. Right. But, for people that say, oh, why don't you make this an X exclusive? It's like, dude, because like I would get a fraction of what I could potentially get on YouTube, So
right.
There's some like sort of culty people that, they just, I don't know, they're obsessed with X and they want to promote X, and it's like, that's great, but as a full-time creator, it's just not there yet. As far as revenue, and even YouTube, I mean, I'm making decent money, definitely decent, but I'm not in like the everyday astronaut category of just mind-blowing revenue yet. So but it's a lot more than just relying on YouTube revenue. It's getting sponsorships. It's growing your Patreon. It's having monetization on X because it helps. So there's a lot of a good creator, I think, should have many streams of revenue.
Right. Have you done anything on The Boring Company yet?
I have, yeah. Every time I go to Las Vegas, I make sure to ride in it and do a video about it. I did a video about it in 2022 when it was a little bit less known about in Vegas, and I think the video got over 100,000 views, so it did okay. We actually have The Boring Company here in Texas in the Bastrop area, so about 30 minutes or so from me. But I've never been inside of it, so perhaps I can get a tour, but maybe that is something I should work on. But there's not as much interest in it. There really isn't. And I think that interest has actually died down in recent years.
It is called The Boring Company.
Right. But I think that what the problem is that people expect, there's one big problem. In Vegas, it should be driverless at this point. In my opinion,
yeah,
to me, it seems like it's fundamentally, has the technology to not have a driver. So when you get in the car and you're like, okay, I still have a driver and you guys are only going, 40 miles an hour and I'm going through a neon tunnel, I can understand why people are underwhelmed. I don't know if that's a Clark County issue that they haven't been able to get the approvals, in the Vegas area, or if it's that they say that they have it ready and they don't, or maybe it's because they're expanding. But it is underwhelming to have a driver.
Right.
Isn't the whole point to, be able to go super fast underground? I mean, it does save you some time walking, but I think too, like in the early days of Boring Company, they also had the Hyperloop, which was super fast, but that's not what we currently have. So people get it confused.
Do you need a dynamic and knowledgeable speaker for an event? Thomas Fry and me, Trent Fowler, are both seasoned keynote speakers, able to converse on a wide array of topics to audiences of all sizes and skill levels. Go to the contact page at futuraudiopodcast.com to book Thomas or myself today, and let us apply our years of experience in public speaking to make your event a smashing success.
Right. Interesting. So to close out, Ellie, I just wanted to ask you a sort of philosophical question. I mean, humans have always been an explorer species. We've always talked about going into space. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts, having covered the speed for so long, about what it is that calls us from the void, what it is that draws our eyes upwards and propels us to conquer new territory and expand the footprint of our species.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we inherently wonder and wander. We want to explore. Maybe not all of us. Some people are homebodies, but a lot of us have this, adventuring, pioneering spirit. And so I think even just if you have a nice clear night to look up at how bright the moon is and just to think, wow, we could actually have like a city up there, and how crazy would it be to see even the footprint of that city, or see, some sort of like outline of that city. In a way, it might be kind of sad, right? Because we have this bare blank moon. And so I think eventually it won't maybe look like that. But I think that, there's a reason that sci-fi really took off, and you have shows like The Expanse, and it just only makes sense that it's the next step. There's a reason why we sailed across the seas and, found all the continents, and, that stuff was a long time ago. Now we're really trying to do really the craziest thing that humans have ever done. And if you look at when Carl Sagan talked about the pale blue dot, it is really crazy to think that everything we know of in history has happened like right here, and how small we are in the grand scheme of the universe. And so I think even going to Mars is like just a scratch on the surface of what we could or should be doing, but it is hard. And, with not a lot of support for NASA, you have companies like SpaceX thankfully prioritizing this. And also, I think just the drive wouldn't be there for, there's a shift that's happening. And so commercial companies are definitely going to take over.
Well, the answer to the question why is why not? Because it's there. Well, it's interesting to think. I mean, my grandkids, I will probably have to explain to them that there used to not be anything on the moon. Like when they look up and they see the factories and such, I'll say there used to not be anything up there. People didn't used to be up there. And they just grow up in a world where now the moon's inhabited. That's just how it is.
It's like crazy to think about. So I guess enjoy it while you can, because, I think it's inevitable. I don't see why it wouldn't happen, but timeline on it, I don't know. What do you think? 10 years at most?
To have people up there, I suspect it will be longer before I would have to explain to a child that what they're seeing with their naked eye didn't used to be there. That's probably more like 30 or 40 years. I expect in the twilight of my life, I will be having those conversations. So that's probably still a ways off. But yeah, I mean, to actually have people up there doing things, doing research, a semi-permanent human home in the lunar expanse is probably not so far away.
It's definitely something that, at first when I went full time on my channel, I'm like, this is not going to last. I'm going to have to go back into news, whatever. And that's clearly not the case. And so now that I'm sort of taking my channel and my role in this industry more seriously, I'm like, I could actually go to space someday. That is totally not out of the realm of possibility. And like, am I ready for that? And have I really considered that? And I think that, we will have better access to space for not just rich people, not too far off from now. And so it's really cool to think that I might actually go to space in my lifetime.
It's always occurred to me that if once we get the first 8, 10, 12 people on the moon or on Mars, that they will form an independent country there, that they will start making their own decisions about what things should happen there, how they want to proceed, because being ruled by people on Earth doesn't make any sense, and so I can see that there's a lot of boisterous people on Earth telling them what to do, and they will come out and say that this is what we've decided. The people of Mars have spoken.
Right.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
So
that's what a lot of the Mars trilogy, the Mars trilogy, Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars trilogy, a lot of it is about that. Once they get there, they're like, I mean, they can't send an army up here, like we're going to make decisions. And that's, I mean, like on the flight to Mars, they're like, we're going to ignore everything they told us to do on Earth. And we're going to like come up with a different way of doing things.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, the fear is that we bring all of the problems that we have here on Earth and we bring them with us. And obviously we don't want that. And so it'll be really interesting to see, how that plays out. And if people do sort of rebel or, maybe they become Martians then. And,
right. But at the same time, it's really difficult to create an economy with 10 people.
Right. Well, maybe they have to wait for the perfect moment when they're a little bit more established to...
Here, let me go print some more money.
Yeah.
Well, they don't take any Fed chairman up there with them. Leave all those bastards behind.
Yes.
Well, very, very, very good. Ellie, where can people find you?
They can find me on YouTube on my channel, Ellie in Space. I'm also Sherriff TV on X, because my last name is Sherriff, like sheriff deputy, oddly enough. Maybe I should make a law enforcement channel. Yeah, so I'm my YouTube channel is, and my X account are probably where you'll find most of my best content.
So fantastic.
The first sheriff on Mars then. Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Literally and figuratively. Excellent. So that's awesome. Thanks so much, Ellie. I love your content. I check it out all the time, and I recommend everybody else do that as well. And we really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.